Welcome to the Roaming Super Series. If you're new and don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to be making a build for every single roaming super that Bungie decided to buff. This build is specifically about the Silkstrike. When I checked earlier today, there was actually a tie between the Silkstrike and Daybreak. But now you guys want to see a Silkstrike build, well, here you guys go. So this build is going to be on prismatic, and you're going to be stunning all champions in the entire game, going to be generating tons of transcendence energy, and you're going to be getting 70% increase in your super damage. And also, once you're done with your super, you're going to be getting 50% of your super energy back. So you're basically going to be getting your Silkstrike even quicker. I also forgot to mention we're going to be producing tons of orbs of power, so you guys are not going to have to worry about producing orbs of power. But in order for you to do all of those things, you're going to need to get the exotic cloak. Yes, I do know this is RNG based, so if you do not have any of these exotic perks, I will show you guys a different exotic you could use. So the main two perks you're going to want to put for this exotic hunter cloak, on the first column, go for Spirit of Galanor. Hits and final blows with your super will return super energy after it ends. So the more kills you get and the more hits you will inflict, you would get 50% of your super energy back. On the second column, go for Spirit of Star Eater. While your super energy is full, picking up an orb of power overcharges your super, granting it bonus damage. So once you collect 6 orbs of power while your super energy is full, it would grant you 70% increase in your super damage. So here's an alternate exotic armor piece you can be using if you do not have any of those two perks on the exotic cloak. You can use this exotic leg armor piece called the Star Eater Scales. This is basically the same thing as Spirit of Star Eater, but this one will give you a small burst of healing, and it would also give you an overshield whenever you cast your super. That's the only difference between the Spirit of Star Eater and Star Eater Scales. But if you are using Star Eater Scales, you will not get that 50% super energy once it ends. So let's head to the Prismatic Hunter. Again, for the super, go for Silkstrike. There's also a cool ability you can be using with Silkstrike. So whenever you activate your super, you can basically dodge infinitely while your super is active. And we do have an aspect called Winter's Shroud that will allow you to slow targets around you. And if you were to dodge twice on an enemy, it will freeze them as well. So you can stun Overload champions, their weakness is slow, and you can stun Unstoppable champions because their weakness is shatter. So you would have to freeze them first and then shatter them. And as you're slowing targets, it would briefly increase your class ability regeneration. And we're going to have another way to slow targets as well, but we'll get onto that later. Might as well I'm talking about the aspects. For the other aspect, to go for Gunpowder Gamble. Whenever we were to defeat targets with our abilities or elemental debuff damage, and once you fully charge up Gunpowder Gamble, it would override your grenade into a solar explosive that can be shot in mid-air, which will cause an ignition, which will stun Unstoppable champions. There's also this cool movement tech you can do with Gunpowder Gamble and the grenade we're using for the build if you just want to move even faster. So once you have Gunpowder Gamble activated, toss it in midair and activate this strand grenade called Grapple. So you're going to treat Gunpowder Gamble as like a tangle. So that's the grenade we're going to be using, which is Grapple. This also unravels targets if you were to hit that target with your Grapple melee. So for the melee ability we're going to be using is Withering Blade. If you were to hit a target twice, it would freeze them, but if you were to hit a target once, it would slow them. And as we are slowing them, it would proc Winter Shroud, which will regenerate our class ability even faster. So it's kind of like an infinite loop with our melee and our class ability. For our class ability, we are using Gambler's Dodge. If you don't know what it does, basically whenever you dodge near an enemy, it would fully refill your melee ability. Whenever you start any activity in the game, you're only going to be starting with one melee charge and your Gambler's Dodge. And if you want to stun an Unstoppable champion, you can throw your Shuriken and then dodge right next to him to freeze him, or vice versa. Let's head to the fragments. There are 6 in total. That is a lot of fragments, but bear with me. The first fragment will allow your super to make enemies explode. It's called Facet of Justice. While you're transcendent, your ability final blows explode. So here's what you need to do first. You're gonna need to get your transcendence ready, and then afterwards get your super ready with your ×7 stacks of Spirit of Star Eater. Once you have those two, activate your transcendent first, then pop your super, and as you're getting kills, they will explode. You're also going to be getting +10 intellect, which is pretty nice for this build because this is a super build. The next grenade ties to Gunpowder Gamble just for you to survive a bit longer whenever you hit yourself with Gunpowder Gamble, and it's called Facet of Mending. Grenade final blows cure you. Whenever you're transcendent, grenade final blows increase the strength of the effect. I mainly put this for Gunpowder Gamble, but for the Transcendent Grenade, it's kind of poopy, dog water. Mainly put it for Gunpowder Gamble, because it can kill you sometimes. The third fragment is for survivability, because we're going to be close and personal for this build, so I chose to put Facet of Protection. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage, while Transcendent, the effect is increased, and you're also going to be getting plus 10 strength as well. The fourth fragment for this build is Facet of Grace, which ties to our kinetic weapon and our power weapon. Whenever we defeat targets with kinetic weapons, it would grant you bonus Transcendence energy. Defeating targets with your super grants you and your nearby allies bonus Transcendence energy, but sadly, you'll get minus 10 resilience. So for this one, I am using an exotic trace rifle. That is the only kinetic power weapon in the entire game currently, called the Microcosm. We'll get onto that later, but this thing gives you tons of Transcendence energy, and by having this fragment, you're going to be getting it even more. The fifth fragment you're going to want to put is Facet of Purpose, because we are going to be generating tons of orbs of power with our energy weapon called the Velocity Baton because of this specific perk I'll talk about later. But here's what Facet of Purpose does. Whenever we pick up an orb of power, it would grant either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or an Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. So we are using Silkstrike, so we are going to be getting Woven Mail, which is the highest amount of damage reduction you could be able to get for a certain buff. But you would get minus 10 recovery. For your sixth and final fragment, go for Facet of Ruin. This one increases the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a stasis crystal or a frozen target, and increases the area of effect of solar ignitions. So in this build, we are going to be causing ignitions and shattering tons of targets. And what's cool about this fragment is that you're getting plus 10 mobility. Now that we are done discussing on the Prismatic Hunter, here's what you need to run for your weapons. For your kinetic weapon, you can choose any scout rifle in the game, because we are using that for the seasonal artifacts that can allow us to stun anti-barrier champions. So in this video, I chose to put the Randy's throwing knife, and the perks that I have make this scout rifle pretty broken. On the third column, go for rapid hit. Whenever you get rapid precision hits, it will temporarily increase stability and reload for this scout rifle, and this thing will reload pretty quickly if you have ×5 rapid hit. And this perk will make the scout rifle 10 times better. You're gonna need to go for kinetic tremors. Sustained kinetic damage to a target emits a shockwave that damages any nearby targets, which also staggers them. And it's so satisfying because this is a rapid fire frame. If you don't know what that does, it basically is like an auto rifle for a scout rifle, if that makes any sense. It just shoots really quickly, and by activating kinetic tremors, you're going to be activating that extremely quickly. For the origin trait on this scout rifle, it's called One Quiet Moment. Grants increased reload speed and handling when out of combat. Swords gained faster movement speed, but the origin trait doesn't really matter because we already have rapid hit that would give us basically 100 reload speed if you have ×5 rapid hit. And for the weapon mod, go for Heavy Ammo Finder Enhancement. This one grants increased heavy ammo finder progress whenever we get weapon final blows for this scout rifle, because we're going to need as much heavy ammo as possible so it can be able to use Microcosm more often. Onto the energy weapon. You're gonna need to go and farm this weapon in the Vespers Host dungeon, specifically the first encounter, and here are the perks you should be going for on this grenade launcher. On the third column, go for Demolitionist. Kills with this weapon will generate grenade energy. Activating your grenade ability reloads this weapon from reserves. And if you guys don't know already, this grenade launcher is an area denial frame. And area denial frame grenade launchers give you tons of Transcendence energy. So this is a void grenade launcher, so you're going to be getting tons of light Transcendence energy. And don't worry about the darkness Transcendence energy, because we're using our abilities, and we have two weapons that are kinetic, which will give us both light and darkness Transcendence energy. The main perk you're gonna want to go for on this grenade launcher is Attrition Orbs. Whenever you deal damage with this grenade launcher, it would create an orb of power. So your main goal for this grenade launcher is to hit as many targets as possible to produce tons of orbs of power, which will give you even more stacks of your Spirit of Star Eater. And you can also be able to stun overload champions because of the seasonal artifacts called the Overload Breach Loaded Grenade Launcher. For the origin trait on the baton, it helps a little bit, but we don't really need it. It's called Braid Legacy. Damage with this weapon generates a small amount of ability energy for the one closest to a full charge. For the weapon mod, I decided to go for Tactical to grant increased reload speed and handling. I just did it for handling, and also, well, basically for both of them actually. I did it for increased reload speed and handling. But there is a seasonal artifact called Rapid Impact that would increase our reload speed even further whenever we deal damage with grenade launchers, so that would help even further. Let's head to the power weapon, which is the microcosm. Here's what it does. The weapon perk is called Paracausal Imbuement. Final blows with this weapon will grant super energy. This weapon gains bonus damage once your super ends. So remember how I told you how to activate your Transcendence and your Silkstrike if you want to make everything go boom? Once that ends, specifically your super, once Silkstrike ends, this weapon will get 20 seconds of increased damage. You guys got to remember, whenever you're done with your super, swap to this power weapon and wreak havoc on the battlefield. And for the intrinsic trait, it's called Paracausal Beam. It would fire a beam of kinetic light, dealing massive bonus damage to shields. So it doesn't matter what shield that enemy has, it will obliterate it. So before I start explaining the seasonal artifacts, if you guys would like to copy it, here you guys go. The main artifact you're going to want to go for is Concussive Reload. Whenever we use a grenade launcher to damage a boss, champion, or break a shield, it would weaken them, which would give us a plus 15% increase in damage to that weakened target. Let's head to the stats for the build. With every PvE build, you got to go for Resilience to give you that 30% damage reduction if you have tier 10. And your second priority could be Discipline or Intellect. Intellect doesn't really matter because roaming supers did get a buff, but if you are one of those people that would like to take advantage of getting your super very quickly, you can go for Intellect if you like, but for me personally, I would go for Discipline just to decrease my grenade cooldown. If you guys would like to copy the build layout, here are all of the armor mods, weapons, aspects right here, but if you just want to take one click of a button, the dim loadout link will be in the link of the description. So let me show you guys the gameplay loop for the build. What you're going to want to do is to get kills with your scout rifle, your grenade launcher, or either your microcosm, and also use your abilities to just basically just get kills with anything until you get your super and your Transcendence. Once you have both of those, be sure to use your baton to generate tons of orbs of power because we have attrition orbs. Once you have ×6 Spirit of Star Eater, activate your Transcendence and then activate your Silkstrike and get as many kills as possible to make them explode because of Facet of Justice. That is basically the gameplay loop for the build. If you guys did enjoy this build video, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit that like and sub button. I will make another community poll for the next roaming super. If you guys would like to participate, be sure to stay tuned for that.